Hello everyone, I hope that you're doing amazing wherever you are in the world. My name is Shikha and I welcome you to my channel. As always, I'm so grateful that you're listening, subscribing and commenting. I really appreciate the support. And in this one I wanted to speak to you about a bias I think we have as human beings that I really wanted to speak about because I'm kind of working on removing that bias from within me. Not completely successfully, but I'm trying. And I wanted to speak to you because I thought that it was so important in my life that maybe it will be important to you as well. And the bias is that I have, that I kind of run my life according to these principles, wrong, absolutely wrong principles, is that people never change. And people are always going to misunderstand me, and no matter what happens, I can keep on talking to them, but they'll never understand me and they don't change. I'm always changing, but they're not changing. And so therefore, our relationship is always going to be tumultuous and chaotic. And therefore, we can't move forward in our relationship. This is something that I kind of hold as a bias in my mind, and I go around the world. And maybe it partly has to do with the fact that I'm an INFJ and I kind of sometimes can become a little bit rigid in the way I look at the world. But also I think it's just a general thing that human beings do. I'll give you an example to kind of put this into perspective. So, when I was a child, I did not like noisy situations. So parties of any kind, lots of people, noise, TV running, the radio running, people shouting and talking and all that stuff, it kind of overwhelmed me. But when I was younger, I didn't understand what was actually overwhelming me. I didn't actually understand who I was or what I was, and so I assumed that there was something wrong with me. I never asked, or I never kind of moved away from the situation. I didn't walk away from a noisy place. I just assumed that there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't strong enough, that I was too weak, etc. And I never even spoke to anyone about it because I just assumed that it was me, right? That I was a problem. As I grew older, I kind of understood that it wasn't me that was a problem necessarily. It was just that I was a little bit extra sensitive to noise and to social situations. And so I would talk to my parents about it, and at that point my parents were still very young, and they didn't, I don't know if they necessarily understood it at that point. Maybe they did, but they were like, buck up, get over it, because you're gonna have to live in the real world, right? But so then I assumed, okay, fine, they don't understand me, they don't get it, and I would kind of moan to myself and whine to myself about the fact that, they're never gonna get it, they never understand me, why is it like that, why do I have to have parents like this? I cried about that a lot. Completely wasted my time doing that. Now, as I'm getting older and I'm in my 30s, almost 40s, I notice that, I have a conversation with my parents about this, and they're very understanding. They understand that I can't deal with loud noises, that I'm not good with social situations, that I need a lot of time on my own in silence and peace. They're very adaptive to me, even though they don't have to be because I'm living in their house. They'll reduce the volume of the TV if they're watching it, or they'll keep it quiet, or like if they are listening to the radio, they'll put on headphones. Or if there's a party at home, they don't expect me to join in unless I have the energy for it, and they're always very cognizant of it now. And so if I was in that mode, thinking to myself, oh my god, they're never going to change, they're never going to understand me, they're always going to be exactly the same, they're never going to adapt to me, or they're never going to be flexible with me, and things like that, I think it could have actually ended up this way, that they wouldn't have, right? But I kind of started talking to them about it, and I started not training them necessarily, but just having conversations with them where I try to explain myself to them. Now you might say, well, you tried 20 years ago and they didn't understand, why try again? And that is exactly the fallacy that I think I want to speak about in this situation, is that people change. Yes, they might not change as fast as you, perhaps they're not changing in the same manner as you, perhaps they're not changing as gregariously as you, perhaps they're moving slower, that's okay. But people are always changing as well, not just you, everyone is changing. And what we need to keep in mind is that just because someone did something somehow 20 years ago or 15 years ago, whatever it might be, doesn't mean that they're going to do it exactly the same way 20 years from now, right? People are always constantly changing, constantly convoluting, growing, developing, becoming bigger, better, bolder, etc. And so I have been carrying this bias within me for the longest time, imagining or assuming that people are never going to change. And then I go into a new situation, and this has been happening very much for me now, where I go into a new situation and I'll meet a person that I, used to know a while back, and I'll be like, oh, I bet you they're exactly the same. And then I'll catch myself and say, no, I don't think that's right. They're probably very different. And let's keep our minds and hearts open. Perhaps it's just the idea that I'm keeping my mind and heart open, and I'm more able to observe their changes rather than keeping myself rigid and closed off and thinking, they're the same. Of course they're the same. I'm not even going to notice any changes they have because, of course, they're the same, right? But I also wanted to say that I think that if you can go into every situation, especially now, especially in this world right now where things are changing very fast, and we can go into every situation and say that, okay, I used to know this person before, maybe they're completely different, they're probably completely different actually, and let me kind of go into it with an open mindset, an open heart, an open mind, and say, okay, you know what, I don't know what I'm going to deal with, I don't know who they are anymore, let me keep my mind open and my heart open. So I think that would kind of allow you to see more of how that person's changed, rather than if you go into the situation thinking, yeah, they're exactly the same, and then you'll be like, yeah, I don't see anything different. Because of course our mind has a huge power, our belief systems have huge power over what we actually end up seeing. Confirmation bias is definitely something you've probably heard of, and our subconscious and our mind works in a way where it tries to reduce the energy that it uses. So if you expect to see something, you will keep on seeing that. And if you expect to see something different, you'll keep on seeing that other thing. And the way it's kind of displayed in the world is that, if you've recently are thinking about buying a car, and you've been thinking about buying a Beetle, a yellow Beetle, for example, and you'll notice that you probably never saw any yellow Beetles before this. But then after that, after you start thinking about it, all of a sudden, everywhere, here, there, everywhere, there are like yellow Beetles everywhere. And you're like, all right, what is going on here? Why are there so many people with yellow Beetles all of a sudden? The thing hasn't changed. That there are always people with yellow Beetles on the road. It's just that your mind has changed and your subconscious is now looking for it. I think it's called the reticular nucleus or something like that. There's actually a part of our brain that's actually responsible for this. And so again, we want to use this in our favor. We want to use this to our advantage. So instead of always expecting someone to be the same, we actually have to kind of start thinking, okay, maybe things are always changing. Maybe people can actually surprise me. Maybe they can actually show me a different part of themselves. Maybe I'll go into a new situation and I won't be bored by it. I won't have to deal with the same nonsense over and over again, right? Again, I'm saying this because it's very easy to keep on expecting the same and receiving the same, right? And as I said, with the confirmation bias, it is absolutely possible that, yeah, you will keep on receiving the same because you're expecting that same thing to happen over and over again. It's like you have blinders on you and you don't see anything differently. Even if the person is completely different, because you expect them to be completely the same, you see them as completely the same. You don't see anything different about them. Again, because your confirmation bias is working there, yeah? And so I really want us to kind of, I'm not saying that, this can work every single time, but it has worked for me in a lot of the different cases where I've gone in and I'm like, all right, I'm not going to judge the person as being exactly the same. I'm not going to judge the person at all. I'm going to assume that they're going to be able to surprise me and that they have changed and they've become better. And so if I go in with that positive attitude, that flexible attitude, I notice that, yeah, it actually turns out that way. People that I used to never have any expectations for have actually surprised me in amazing manners. And I'm looking at them thinking, wow, am I different or are they different? Well, both, right? So I think this is very relevant right now because I do notice that the world that we live in right now is very much rigid and inflexible. We expect things to be the same and they end up being exactly the same. And so I think if you want things to be a little bit different, you have to use this confirmation bias to your favor. You have to use this fallacy of expecting everything to be the same, and tweak it and change it so you can look at the world in a different manner every single time. I think that's what the beginner's mindset is all about. You look at a flower and you say, oh, I've seen this flower 1 billion times before. It's so boring. You can look at it that way. Or you can look at a flower with a beginner's mindset, where the babies look, actually, like how do babies look at the world? Everything is new to them. and everything's beautiful and everything's like, whoa, I can't believe I have hands, and oh my god, I have hair, you know. And I'm not saying that, you know, completely go crazy about it, but there's a lot of things in the world that are constantly changing, but because of our cynicism, because of our rigidity, we don't actually see the differences. We kind of box ourselves in to these tiny, tiny boxes, and then we wonder why we're bored with the world, or we feel jaded with the world. Well, it's because we've boxed ourselves in. And so, not to have a baby's mindset completely, but to kind of bring that into your life a little bit. Be amazed by everything. And even if you look at that flower, if you've looked at it 1,000 times, still look at it with, wow, this is a beautiful flower, and I can't believe I get to see it every day. And oh my god, I have eyes and I can see, and oh my god, look at this beautiful weather, and oh my god, you know, everything kind of thing. So, and that's how I'm trying to look at the world as well. It's like, oh, I've seen this porch 1,000,000,000 times before, but look, I have a porch. That's amazing, and I have plants on it, and I can walk on it. And oh my god, I have legs and things like that. And it's really kind of changing the way I look at the world. It's kind of bringing more joy into my life rather than being the cynical, jaded person that I was before. I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions about this, do comment below, and I shall see you the next time around. Bye for now.